All right, we have more changes unfolding in the global threat landscape. Changes that have the FBI and Homeland Security now zeroing in on a potential window of time, they say, to stay away from mass gatherings. This has been building. We're going to show you the new warnings, also what's behind the warnings, how certain actions or inactions have consequences, like at the southern border. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So new warnings from the FBI and DHS to local law enforcement around the country this past weekend, telling them to take this alert seriously, specifically saying to watch large gatherings. Now, this has been building for months. It's not just because of the eclipse. We'll play the most recent warning from this past weekend in a minute. But first, just to lay out the chain of events here, because there are breadcrumbs to follow. For example, about 2 months ago was the first inkling we got that the FBI was worried something is coming. The FBI Director Wray, went to the Major County Sheriffs of America conference in February, on February 7th, almost 2 months ago to the day. He did this personally, and he didn't make a big splash about it. He didn't make a public speech or anything like that. Instead, he privately briefed the 3,200 sheriffs himself personally on what he calls a heightened threat landscape here in the States. Watch this.
We were briefed by the FBI Director, Wray, the Director of the FBI, and several federal agencies. There's 3,300 sheriffs in the United States. The President of the United States refuses to meet with the sheriffs of the 3,300. We have a hierarchy. We have a president. We have a vice president. President of the United States refuses to meet with the sheriffs. And we were told by the FBI director, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. The FBI director said when 9/11 hit, there's more red flags now than then. So, and he said, these are people that want to kill us and do harm to us.
Specifically, he cites the 10 plus million new undocumented migrants that have entered the country in the last 3 years. Undocumented, meaning we don't know who they are. Now, obviously, the vast majority are just regular people, but there's a small percentage of them who came here or were sent here for a different reason. Now, even if that number's just 1%, that's still what, like 10,000 people or something like that. So that was 2 months ago. Then a few weeks ago, he went to Capitol Hill. The director of the FBI went to Capitol Hill, briefed Congress about the same thing, how they have intel apparently that tells them something's coming, that they're worried something is coming, how the threat level's now basically off the charts. Here's Wray himself explain this. Watch.
From an FBI perspective, we are seeing a wide array of very dangerous threats that emanate from the border. So I want to be a little bit careful how far I can go in open session, but there is a particular network that has where some of the overseas facilitators of the smuggling network have ISIS ties that we're very concerned about, and that we've been spending an enormous amount of effort with our partners investigating. Exactly what that network is up to is something that's, again, the subject of our current investigation.
Since October 7th, though, that threat has gone to a whole nother level. And so this is a time, I think, for much greater vigilance.
Now, what exactly the intel is that they have, what they're hearing, what they know, I have no idea, but it's odd when the director himself goes around doing these briefings. It's very unusual. I said a few weeks ago, it strikes me as him almost checking a box, preparing for something to happen, basically ass covering, giving himself and the Bureau some cover. He could say, hey, we did everything we could. We warned you all. We were working in the background, telling everyone we could. Something like that. Again, just speculation. That's the impression I get when I see all of this. But then, a few days ago, another warning, this time with a timetable. Over the next week, they said. Here's the warning from DHS and the FBI obtained this time by ABC News, citing a U.S. intel bulletin warning that, quote, radicals in the U.S. might respond to calls for similar bad acts in the wake of last month's deadly bad act at a concert hall in Moscow, unquote. Here's the report. Watch this.
This evening, we are also following this new security warning right here in the U.S. from the FBI and Homeland Security. warning of potential threats to public gatherings. The timing of this and why they're concerned tonight. Here's our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas with late reporting.
Tonight, FBI and Homeland Security officials are warning U.S. law enforcement about the potential for terror inspired by that deadly ISIS attack in Moscow targeting a concert hall. The concern, according to the bulletin, violence targeting mass gatherings such as sports stadiums, concert venues, or houses of worship in the United States. Law enforcement told to be on the lookout for any suspicious activity. The bulletin coming just days before millions will gather to watch the eclipse on Monday. Authorities say following the Moscow attack, ISIS and its supporters celebrated the assault and shared graphic and violent attack footage, the terror group calling for similar attacks in the United States. I'm told U.S. law enforcement is being urged to take this bulletin seriously. Sources say ISIS remains a very real threat, Dave.
Now, what has the intel community so flustered about this, apparently, is the current administration's open border policies that have flooded the country with 10+ million new people crossing the border illegally in just the last 3 years, many of whom are military-aged men coming from places, let's just say, that have a distaste for America. We're not talking about Central and South Americans here. Many of the people crossing the border are coming from faraway places. This is a quote from Director Wray last month in front of Congress. He says this, quote, "We have had dangerous individuals entering the U.S. from a variety of sources," unquote. That was at the Worldwide Threat Conference. He said that a month ago. So what to make about all this? Well, obviously, be careful. Maybe try to avoid large gatherings for the time being. But when you read ABC's report about this, they connect it to the concert hall in Russia a few weeks ago, which is odd, considering that the Russian government continues to say that was not ordered by you-know-who. Instead, they say all the people involved were Tajiks with ties to the Ukraine. They also released evidence a few days ago about payments made to these attackers, apparently linking it to Ukraine. All of which, again, take with a grain of salt. The bottom line is be careful. And also, if you want to know why they're so quick to blame IS, Lindsey Graham posted about this on X the other day, saying the quiet part out loud, because the guy always does that. Basically what they're doing is using it as an excuse to deploy the U.S. military back into Afghanistan. That's what they do. This is called a hook in the media to drive home a narrative, convincing Americans to go back to Afghanistan is not going to be easy. Nobody wants that. So throwing ISIS back in the mix, what do you think's going to happen? It's another way for them to push us back in there. And Lindsey Graham can't help himself. Look what he wrote. Now, the article also mentions the eclipse from yesterday, how a lot of people are going to be gathering to watch it, but this bulletin, this intel bulletin, wasn't specifically around the eclipse. It was a timetable about the next few days to the next week, how that's what they're zeroing in on. Now, who knows why they're doing that? Again, we don't know the intel. We don't know what information they have, but regardless, better safe than sorry. So I just wanted to put that out there. No one's talking about this. Everyone's talking about the eclipse, or they were up until yesterday. Be cognizant about this. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.